Hello guys, welcome to Knowledge Pond YouTube channel. This is second video of MVC 6 video series. So we have seen a couple of things in video 1 like part 1 of MVC 6 video series. We have seen overview of Microsoft.NET 2015 and what exactly the bold move Microsoft has taken with respect to web world, and we have seen some of the features, benefits, architecture of .NET 4.6 and core framework, and we have seen .NET execution model and how Microsoft evaluated with respect to web stack world, and we have seen a couple of challenges in current web world and ASP.NET 5 and an MVC 6, and we have seen advantages of ASP.NET 5 and architecture as well, and finally we have seen that how ASP.NET 5 and an MVC 6 fit in the world of open source and cross-platform world. Finally, we have seen ASP.NET Core 1.0. Why exactly the Microsoft renamed current MVC 6 and ASP.NET 5 to ASP.NET Core 1.0. So in this video, we'll see what exactly the MVC page lifecycle, MVC 5 current challenges, and MVC 6 architecture and benefits, and what are the changes in project structure uh, for MVC 6, and we'll also see that how MVC 6 differ between .NET Framework 4.6 and Core, and we'll see and supported client-side and server-side frameworks. So MVC is like a model view controller. It is a software architectural design pattern, and the main intention behind the main design like main intention behind of MVC is like separation of application into three logical containers, so that the domain model and controller logics are separated from the user interface. So as a result, the application maintenance and testing is makes very easy, and it helps us applications to testing for with respect to developer perspective. The unit testing is very easy since they completely separated a model and a view and user interfaces separately. So if you would like to test controller part, you really don't need to like depends on model or database part. So we can test independently each component or each module separately independently. So model is responsible for representing the data of the application, and it also helps some business and validation logic of business rules for the data. In general, model objects retrieve the stores model state from databases. So here we can use a couple of data access technology in the data access layer like ADO.NET, LinkU, and Entity Framework. So views are responsible for displaying the application user interfaces. It uses internally two view engines, Razor and ASPX. So Razor is a minimized version of HTML. It reduces a lot of code and it gives the more faster than ASPX engine. So controller is heart of MVC. So it is responsible to handle all browser incoming requests and retrieves the data from model, and then specify and decides view templates and then return the response to the browser. The controller class is where exactly we write all incoming handling requests, and then it can goes to the model place and retrieves the data from the databases. Ultimately, it decides what kind of response we need to send back to the user. So finally, we can say that model is maintaining the application state. We are responsible for displaying the user interfaces. Controllers handle the response and request of the input and interactions. So if you see the request, how internally request and process how response is coming back from the server. So I'll explain you very clearly about what exactly happening when we request a particular resource from the server. Let's have a look at each phase. How the request is processing, from request to routing handler and controller, from the web request to view engines and view and the responses back to the browser. In MVC, there is no like physical files exist for each request as traditionally in ASP.NET we used to have. In ASP.NET, every request has a separate file resides on the server. But in the case of MVC, every request is goes to the routing table where it can find a corresponding controller and action method. So all requests are routed to a special class called controller. The controller is responsible like for generating responses and sending the content or data back along with view to the browser. So as I told you earlier that in the previous slides, MVC is logically divided into three components or containers. So if you want to build any MVC application, the MVC application should have at least one controller or many as well. So each controller can handle multiple requests with the help of action methods. That means the controller have one or more action methods. So when the request reaches to MVC application, so these requests are routed to a particular controller. Then are now like all the requests first reaches to the routing level. So here it comes the routing table. The routing table comes into the picture right now. Now the root table comes into the picture. This root table to map the request to a particular controller and action. So whenever the application start, in general, the under application started, uh, and it call the methods of it can register all the routes and by specified by us like so if my request is like this, then my request should go into particular controller and particular action. So that controller typically executes uh, all the incoming requests, and it reaches the model level and executes and fetches the requested information, and along with that data, it chooses the right UI from the U folder, and it sends back the complete information back to the user. In this, it takes help of view engines, then it renders the U to the browser. The finally user can view requested view along with the data. So this everything I clearly explained in the previous slide. So what are the main advantages of MVC? So main advantage of MVC is separation of concern. So that means like the whole application, the complexity of application is divided into three logical compartments or components called a model, view, and a controller. So that the organization of code is very clean and very granular. And moreover, the testing, this MVC is the second advantage is the test-driven development. That means it's very easy to test the whole MVC application since there is no dependency on each component. Independently, we can test independently. So integration with the JavaScript frameworks. That means there is a direct support, inbuilt support for latest advanced JavaScript frameworks like Knockout.js and AngularJS. At the same time, it supports for UI technologies like Bootstrap as well. There is a full control of code, like we have complete control on how the whole request is processing and how we can design the MVC application. One way we can say MVC is friendly for designers and developers. And again, it has another advantages is search engine optimization. If you see like in earlier versions of ASP.NET MVC, there are if you are targeting your application by using different technologies like web pages and MVC and web API, and there are some areas are very common and there is some redundancy if you are developing an application. If you see there are common between web pages and MVC is a Razor and HTTP HTML helpers. If you are developing a app using MVC and Web API, there are some repetition like redundancy, common controllers, actions, filters, and model binding and dependency injections. So then we'll see what exactly the MVC and MVC architecture, MVC 6 benefits. So one way we can say MVC one word by saying one word like MVC 6 is unified framework combining all three technologies like web pages, MVC and web API into a single framework called as MVC 6. So it is a unified single application framework as I told you earlier for MVC and web API and web pages. It is now merged all together into a single framework. So in one way we can say MVC 5, it is a next version of MVC 5 and web API to web pages too. So and now they reduce there is a common between all technologies different in earlier versions. Now MVC and web API web pages are using a common set of abstraction for HTTP related data, routing related data, action selection, filters, model binding, and many other cases as well. And it has the ability to host even IaaS and even self-hosting, or else we can create our own hosting environment as well. And moreover, there is a built-in support for dependency injection and IOC container. So now we can develop MVC 6 application both .NET Framework 4.6 and cloud-based optimized .NET Framework Core. And it direct support for cross-platform support. So now we can develop apps for both Windows and another OS operating platform as well like Linux and Mac OS. And it supports OWIN like Open Web Interface for .NET. And there is a middleware where we can stitch our request pipeline, how it interacts, how it moves forward our request to each layer. So I have a dedicated session for OWIN. There is a video part 3 of MVC6 video series. And there are a couple of direct support for client-side frameworks like AngularJS, Knockout.js, and rich UI framework, the Bootstrap. And it built in support for some task management tools like Granite and Gulp. At the same time, there are a couple of package management tools also. There is a direct support for Bower. It comes along with the moment if you select a project from Visual Studio. The project templates, the base templates, it comes along with few supported client-side frameworks and task management tools and package management tools. So at the same time, it supports direct support and merged like different server-side frameworks. The MVC6 is the built-in and Web API, Entity Framework, Identity and Signaler. At the server-side package management tool, as we all know that Nugget is server-side package management tool. So we'll see how MVC6 is behaving differently on different frameworks. When we target to develop MVC6 application by using .NET 4.6, and if you are developing using .NET Core 5, how it differs on both two environment. It both two supports cloud-ready and modular design, dependency injection, consistency tracing and debugging, faster development, open source, and full side-by-side support. It supports only for .NET Core 5. So let's see the project structure in Visual Studio, how it is, how what are the files and folders, and what are the new files has been added in Visual Studio project template. Let's see. Let me open the Visual Studio 2015. So let me start with new project. The moment if you select the new project wizard, then the left hand side templates you need to select web. From there right hand side ASP.NET web application, and please give some name like so please select OK. In Visual Studio 2015 has new project templates for ASP.NET 5, which is entirely changed from traditional project template and structure. And there is no direct support for migrating earlier versions of Visual Studio project to latest versions like MVC 5 to MVC 6. So on ASP.NET of 5, like if you see, there are some templates like ASP.NET 4.5.2 templates here where we can design MVC 5 application, and the templates for MVC 6 is ASP.NET 5 templates, and again there are the empty template for if you want to develop and design from the scratch. You please select empty template. If your application, if you are targeting your application for a web API support, like web API service based app, then RESTful HTTP services, then you can select web API template. If you are using MVC 6 app and it needs some built-in support, some features, you please select web application template. Then yeah, you can leave as it is all these remaining settings. Now we are not concentrating much on these settings. My intention, I want to give information about the file structure and what are the new files has been added. So ASP.NET 5 project structures adds new concepts, and it replaces some legacy elements found in the previous version of ASP.NET projects. The new default web project templates creates solution and project structure. And the first things which we may notice about this new structure is that it includes solution items folder and a web folder like SRC folder. And under solution items folder, there is a global.json file, and web project itself is located within the SRC folder solution. So this is a bit different compared to older versions of MSC applications. The new structure also includes special folder www root folder and a dependencies section in the addition to the reference section that was present in the past versions of ASP.NET as well. In the root folder, the project like there are also several new files such as bower.json, config.json, and gulf file.json, package.json, and startup.cs files. And we can notice that the files global.six file, package.config, and web.config files are gone. We can say one way we can say goodbye to web. All the configuration files. So let's review the project. Like in the Visual Studio, the Solution Explorer window. Uh, let's see some of the files. Let's start with the global.json file. What exactly it contains. So in this global.json file, this is used to configure the solution as a whole. It includes just two sections right now: the projects and SDK by default. The projects contain the SRC. Here it listed our project, our projects like if you add one more project, it will be added under the source. If you add any test projects, it will be added. So the next it tells about the versioning 1.0. RCA updated 1. So then we can see some project.json file. This is where we can set up all the project related settings. So it is used to define the project server side dependencies as well as other project specific information. The presence of project.json file defines the .NET execution engine, and it also gives the complete information about runtime environment. It starts with the user session ID, then versioning information, compilation option, then all the dependencies which are used for this project. Then it tells some commands, and at the same time it gives what are the frameworks, whether you use a complete .NET framework or you use only .NET Core 5.0, and it gives what are the files you need to exclude and publish, exclude, and some script files as well. Then we'll see that app settings, application setting file, what it contains. This file allows to include additional project information such as a connection string. So where earlier this we used to give all the connection string information in web.config file. Now it is completely changed. Now we have to define our connection string app settings.json file. At the same time, we can also include application insights. And at the logging information also, we can include all these information in app settings.json file. And if comes to that config.json file, the remaining things, properties is very similar to older version. And let me see that one. This is very similar. And if you see the reference section, there is a bit changes. There are two kind of references are being added. .NET 4.5.1, the 4.4.6, or this is the complete full .NET framework. The second one is the optimized cloud-ready .NET framework. And the www root, this everyone knows that it is an actual root of the web app for accessing all kind of files, including static files, with full protection, not like as earlier default.aspx and routing in MVC. So if you see the dependencies, it gives client side and server side dependencies all we place over under dependency folder. So again the controller is very similar to older version of MVC, and the migration folder and model also is very similar. Again the services and the view models and view. And the last things which we are interested little bit about things we'll see this dependencies as well. Under dependency we have bower and newpin, npm. The dependence these folders corresponding to two package package managers bower. If you open that bower, we'll go through what are the things it can support, a bootstrap and a jQuery. And if you open the npm, so any gulf related information it can be routed over here. So the last things which we need very much interest about startup.cs file. So startup class provides an entry point for the application, and it is possible to have an environment specific startup classes and methods. And ASP.NET sets the primary assembly for class named startup. It starts with the startup dot the entry, like the first controller comes to the startup file. From there, it can start executioning. It can start build up pipeline, request pipeline, or where we can attach our middleware. Typically, the way an application will be configured is defined within the startup file in the constructor level. So here we'll give all the application related configuration, and it has should have some config method, the configuration method, and where we can may optionally also define all the configuration services. These configuration services, the configuration service method defines the services used by our application, and a config method is used to define what kind of middleware and how we can build our request pipeline. The config method is where we can is to specify how the ASP.NET application will respond to individual HTTP requests. We can configure every request to receive the same response, and more complex sets of pipeline configuration can be encapsulated in the middleware like MVC6, Web API, Identity Signal, or and add the existing extension method on I, where we can set up our I application builder app. So there here. So we can see several extension method are used to configure our pipeline with the support of browser link error pages. We can set here all browser links if you are any browser links, and static error pages, static files, and moreover MVC6 as well, identity as well. So one way we can say that we can say goodbye to web.configuration files, web.config file, and ASP.NET file like MVC6 no longer stores all the configuration settings in XML. So okay, and if you see that we can, if in the nutshell, if you say MVC 6 is unified a single application framework for MVC and a web API and web pages. It consists of next version of MVC. We can say one word like MVC 6 is next version of MVC 5 and web API 2 and web pages. And now MVC and Web API web pages are using common set of abstraction for HTTP routing, action selections, filters, modal binding, and so on. And there is a built-in support for dependency injection, and it supports for cloud ready, and there is no dependency on web server or system.web. So we have gone through the new file structure, project structure, and it supports for side-by-side deployment and supports for dynamic compilation. And moreover, it very well fitted for open source and cross-platform. Apart from our regular Windows, it supports so we can design, develop apps for Mono and Mac, Linux as well. Thank you very much, and if you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You will get notified further any updates from this channel. Thank you very much.